You didn't notice the moment it ended. There was no signal, no warning, no announcement, but something stopped watching you. Most people spend their entire lives inside tests. They never pass, not because they fail, but because they keep reacting. You didn't stet. At a point where most people break, explain themselves, or give up, you stayed aligned without knowing it mattered. That's why things feel quieter now. That's why the pressure suddenly lifted. That's why certain doors closed without pain and others opened without effort. This video is not motivation. It's such confirmation. Because what you passed wasn't set obvious. It wasn't set fair. And it wasn't meant to be survived by many. Free mind is shockingly proud of what you did. And once you understand why, you'll never doubt the direction of your life again. Stay with me. This wasn't set luck. The most dangerous tests are never announced. There was no warning, no countdown, no clear moment where you could say, "This is it." That was intentional. If the test had been obvious, it wouldn't have measured anything real. It would have measured performance, not character. Preparation, not instinct. Behavior, not identity. So instead, the test arrived disguised as confusion. It looked like delay, like silence, like things not moving when they should have, like being overlooked while less capable people advanced, like giving effort without feedback, like doing the right thing and receiving nothing in return. Most people fail right here, not because they are weak, but because they demand clarity before commitment. They say, "Once I understand what's happening, then I shall act correctly." But life doesn't reward that order. The test wasn't about whether you could succeed with instructions. It was about whether you could remain aligned without them. You were placed in a position where your reactions would reveal your level of internal order. No one told you how to respond. No one corrected you. No one applauded you. And that's where almost everyone collapses. Some complained. Some explained themselves. Some demanded recognition. Some grew bitter. Some abandoned their standards the moment they felt unseen. You didn't. You kept showing up the same way, even when the environment stopped responding. That decision required something rare: inner authority. Inner authority means you don't need external confirmation to behave correctly. You don't wait for fairness to be visible before staying fair. You don't need certainty to remain disciplined. That's why this test had to be invisible. Because visibility invites performance. Invisibility exposes truth. The moment no one was watching, your real structure was revealed. Not your ambition, not your intelligence, your stability. Free mind doesn't promote talent first. It promotes reliability under ambiguity. Anyone can act right when the rules are clear. Anyone can behave when rewards are visible. But very few can stay grounded when the path goes dark. That's what you proved. You didn't break your values to get relief. You didn't lower your standards to feel better. You didn't sabotage yourself just to regain control. You stayed intact. And here's the part most people don't realize. The test didn't end because circumstances improved. Circumstances improved because the test ended. The moment you showed that your behavior wasn't dependent on outcomes, the system stopped evaluating you. Because evaluation is only necessary when reliability is uncertain. That's why things shifted quietly afterward. No announcement, no dramatic reward, just movement. You weren't meant to notice the test while it was happening. Because the highest level tests aren't meant to be passed consciously. They're meant to reveal who you are before you know you're being measured. And you passed. The moment pressure rises, most people lose access to their higher mind. Emotion takes the wheel. Impulse speaks first. And whatever intelligence they had becomes irrelevant. This was the real trap. The situation you were placed in wasn't designed to overwhelm you physically. It was designed to provoke you emotionally. Because emotional reaction is the fastest way to expose instability. The system didn't need to push you hard. It just needed to wait. It waited for frustration, for anger, for the urge to defend yourself, for the impulse to prove something, for the temptation to respond immediately, loudly, or dramatically. That's how most people fail. They confuse reaction with strength. They believe expression equals power. They think responding fast means responding well, but you paused. That pause wasn't hesitation, it was mastery. In that moment, you did something extremely rare. You created distance between stimulus and response. That distance is everything. It sits where awareness lives. It sits where choice exists. It sits where identity overrides emotion. Most people never build that gap. They live inside their reactions. They are dragged by them. You stepped outside. You felt the emotion, but you didn't let it command you. You allowed it to pass without letting it write your actions. That single act changed the entire evaluation. Free mind does not trust brilliance that collapses under emotional pressure. It trusts composure. Because intelligence without emotional regulation becomes destructive. Power without control becomes chaos. You demonstrated restraint when reaction would have been justified. And that's what made it impressive. Anyone can be calm when things are easy. Very few can stay calm when their ego is challenged. Their effort is ignored or their expectations are violated. You didn't need to be right in the moment. You didn't need the last word. You didn't need to win the exchange. You chose long-term alignment over short-term relief. And here is what most people don't understand. Every emotional reaction resets the test. Every impulsive response extends the evaluation. But composure accelerates clearance. The moment you stopped reacting emotionally, the system registered something critical. You were no longer controllable through pressure. At that point, testing loses its purpose. Because tests exist to locate weakness, and emotional reactivity is the most common weakness there is. You closed that door. You showed that your center doesn't collapse when circumstances push, that your behavior doesn't depend on how you feel in the moment. That level of self-regulation is rare, and rarity is what advancement responds to. This wasn't said about suppressing emotion, it was about commanding it. And that's why lesson 2 mattered. You didn't react emotionally, you responded deliberately. And that difference is everything. One of the most seductive traps in any transformation is validation, not success, not comfort, validation. Because validation feels like proof that you're on the right path. It feels like relief. It feels like safety. And that's why it stops growth. The situation you were in quietly offered you an exit. Not a dramatic one, a subtle one. All you had to do was explain yourself, justify your choices, seek reassurance that you weren't wrong, foolish, or alone. Most people take that offer without realizing what they're trading. They trade momentum for applause, depth for agreement, future authority for present comfort. You didn't test. You resisted the urge to be understood. That decision is extremely rare because the human mind craves confirmation. We want someone to say, "You said right." We want recognition that our effort matters. We want proof that the sacrifice is worth it. But growth doesn't happen where validation is plentiful. It happens where it sits absent. Free mind measures something very specific here. Whether you can continue evolving without being seen. You had opportunities to seek approval, to gather allies, to make noise, to explain why you were doing what you were doing. But you understood something most people don't. Explanation dilutes conviction. The more you explain yourself, the more you unconsciously ask for permission. You chose silence over self-justification. Not because you were unsure, but because you were certain enough not to negotiate your path. That's when growth accelerated. Because validation shifts your center outward. You begin adjusting your direction based on reactions. You start measuring yourself by how others respond. You avoided that trap. You allowed misunderstanding. You accepted being unseen. You let people mislabel your discipline as distance, your focus as coldness, your restraint as weakness. And you didn't correct them. That restraint preserved something critical: internal alignment. Free mind does not advance minds that require applause to continue. It advances minds that can endure obscurity without losing form. Here is the truth most people miss. Validation feels good, but it locks you into old identities. Growth feels lonely, but it unlocks new ones. You chose the harder path. You didn't chase reassurance when doubt was available. You didn't trade your future self for momentary comfort. You stayed focused on becoming, not being approved. That's why this lesson mattered. Because the moment you stopped needing validation, you stopped being influenced by those who couldn't see where you were going. And that's when free mind recognized you as self-directed. Self-directed minds don't need supervision. They don't need encouragement. They don't need permission. They move. You proved you could. There is a moment in every serious path where feedback disappears. Not failure. Not success. Nothing. No signs that you are moving forward. No evidence that your effort is registering. No confirmation that what you are doing matters. This is where most people stop. Not because they're incapable, but because the human mind is trained to respond to signals. When results vanish, doubt takes their place. You were placed in that gap intentionally. A stretch of time where your actions produced no visible outcome, where consistency felt pointless, where discipline felt unrewarded. The system wasn't measuring productivity here. It was measuring dependence. Specifically, do you need results to continue, or can you continue without them? Most people are outcome-driven. They move when rewarded. They stop when reinforcement disappears. You didn't. You stayed disciplined without applause, focused without momentum, committed without certainty. That is extremely rare, because moving without results feels irrational. It feels inefficient. It feels foolish to those watching from the outside. But free mind understands something deeper. Results test skill. Silence tests structure. When results went dark, you didn't negotiate your standards. You didn't ask, is this still worth it? You didn't dilute your effort to protect your ego. You stayed the same. That consistency revealed a critical trait. You are not controlled by immediate payoff. That alone disqualifies most people from advancement. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If you need visible progress to stay disciplined, your discipline isn't real. It's transactional. You proved yours wasn't set. You treated effort as identity, not as a means to validation. That sets when the evaluation shifted, because the moment you continue without evidence, you demonstrate trust in process over outcome. And trust in process signals maturity. Free mind does not accelerate those who panic in silence. It advances those who can operate in uncertainty without distorting themselves. You didn't chase shortcuts when things slowed. You didn't abandon the path for something easier. You didn't perform for attention. You endured. And endurance without feedback is one of the rarest forms of strength. This is why, when movement returned, it felt sudden. Why clarity appeared without warning. Why progress resumed without explanation. The system wasn't stalled. It was watching. And the moment you proved that your commitment didn't depend on results, the test concluded. You didn't quit when results went dark. That's why the light returned. Most people try to escape patterns by resisting them. They fight habits. They argue with the past. They relive old conversations in their head, trying to win something that's already over. That approach rarely works, because resistance keeps the pattern alive. Whatever you fight, you continue feeding. You were tested differently. You weren't asked to confront the pattern. You were asked to outgrow it. The old cycle showed up the way it always had. Same triggers, same temptations, same emotional shortcuts. And for the first time, you didn't engage. No argument, no rebellion, no dramatic exit. You simply didn't participate. That silence was not avoidance. It was completion. Free mind watches closely at this stage because this is where most people relapse. They believe growth requires confrontation. They think healing demands explanation. But true evolution happens when something no longer has access to you. You didn't need closure. You didn't need apologies. You didn't need the past to acknowledge you. You changed your response. And that changed everything. Patterns don't survive without participation. They collapse when attention is withdrawn. You didn't break the pattern by force. You broke it by indifference. That indifference was not numbness. It was clarity. You understood that reacting again, even differently, would still keep the loop active. So you chose something far more powerful: disengagement. This is where most people fail. They want resolution with emotion attached. They want the past to recognize the growth. But free mind only advances those who no longer require recognition from what they've outgrown. By not fighting, you conserved energy. By not explaining, you preserved direction. By not repeating, you ended the cycle. That's mastery. The old pattern expected resistance. It expected emotion. It expected reaction. It didn't expect silence. And silence is what collapsed it. This is why things suddenly felt lighter afterward. Why familiar stressors lost their charge. Why old triggers stopped pulling you backward. Not because the past changed, but because you did. Free mind is proud of this stage because it signals finality. When someone stops fighting what used to control them, the system marks that chapter closed. You didn't need to win. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need to prove anything. You walked past it. And that's why it no longer follows you. Pain is not what disqualifies people. Bitterness is. Most people survive difficulty. They endure loss, delay, rejection, and pressure. But something subtle happens afterward. They harden. They begin protecting themselves by closing off. They let disappointment turn into cynicism. They carry resentment quietly, believing it makes them stronger. It doesn't steer. Bitterness distorts perception. It changes how you interpret events, people, and opportunities. It turns growth into defense. This was one of the most critical stages of your evaluation, because bitterness doesn't show up loudly. It shows up in tone, in assumptions, in how quickly trust erodes. You had every excuse to become bitter. You experienced unfairness without explanation, effort without recognition, waiting without clarity. Most people justify bitterness as wisdom. You didn't. You stayed clear. That doesn't mean you ignored what happened. It means you didn't let it poison how you moved forward. You processed pain without letting it define you. You allowed disappointment without letting it rewrite your character. That is extremely rare. Free mind watches closely here because bitterness contaminates everything that comes after it. It ruins decision-making. It turns opportunity into threat. It transforms neutrality into hostility. You avoided that collapse. You didn't just assume the worst in people. You didn't turn guardedness into identity. You didn't let past wounds dictate future posture. You stayed open without being naive, aware without being cynical. That balance is difficult, because bitterness often disguises itself as strength. It feels like control. It feels like protection. But free mind doesn't advance those who armor themselves against life. It advances those who remain clear under pressure. Clarity requires courage. It means choosing not to carry resentment, even when it feels justified. It means releasing the need to make others pay emotionally for what you endured. You did that, And here it is what most people don't realize. Bitterness locks you into the past. Clarity releases you into the future. The moment you refused to harden, the evaluation shifted. Because free mind trusts those who can absorb impact without becoming distorted by it, you didn't instead become bitter. And because of that, nothing inside you was compromised. You remained usable. This is where almost everyone fails, even after surviving everything else. People can endure pressure. They can resist reaction. They can stay disciplined for a while. But when it comes to responsibility, something breaks. Because responsibility without blame feels unfair. It feels like carrying weight that doesn't belong to you. It feels like accepting consequences you didn't fully cause. It feels like surrendering the right to be angry. That's why most people never do it. They look for someone to point at, someone to fault, something to hold responsible for why things unfolded the way they did. Blame is comforting. It gives pain a direction. It gives frustration an outlet. Responsibility does the opposite. Responsibility turns the focus inward. And that's exactly why this stage mattered more than the others. You were placed in circumstances where blaming would have been reasonable. There were external factors you could have highlighted, other people's decisions, timing, systems, unfair dynamics. You didn't deny those things existed. You just didn't build your identity around them. Instead of asking, who caused this? You asked, what part of this is mine to carry forward? That question changes everything. Because responsibility is not about guilt, it's about power. Blame gives power away. Responsibility takes it back. When you blame, you wait. When you take responsibility, you move. Most people confuse responsibility with self-punishment. They think it means accepting fault for everything. It doesn't. It means accepting authorship of your next move, regardless of what happened before. You did something extremely rare here. You refused to let circumstances decide who you would become. You didn't say, this happened to me, therefore I am justified in changing my standards. You didn't say, because others failed me, I am allowed to lower myself. You said, without words, whatever happened, I remain responsible for who I am next. That is elite-level maturity. Free mind watches closely at this point because responsibility without blame signals something critical. Internal locus of control. People with external control systems are always reactive. They wait for conditions to improve. They wait for fairness. They wait for permission. People with internal control systems don't wait. They adapt. You adapted without becoming cold. You adjusted without becoming defensive. You learned without becoming self-critical. That balance is incredibly difficult. Because the ego wants to either blame outward or attack inward. You did neither. You stayed clean. You acknowledged mistakes without collapsing into shame. You recognized limits without turning them into excuses. You accepted reality without resenting it. That combination is what separates adults from survivors. Survivors live in reaction to what happened. Adults live in responsibility for what comes next. You crossed that line, and here is what most people never realize. The moment you take responsibility without blame, the past loses leverage over you. Events stop defining you. People stop controlling your emotional posture. Circumstances stop dictating your identity. Because blame binds you to what was. Responsibility frees you to choose what will be. This is why, after this stage, things felt different. Not easier, but clearer. You stopped replaying conversations in your head, stopped imagining how things should have gone, stopped waiting for acknowledgement that might never come. You didn't need it anymore, because responsibility grounded you in the present. Free mind marks this moment as a transition point. Before this, you were being evaluated. After this, you became self-governing. Self-governing minds do not need correction. They do not need supervision. They do not need external pressure to act with integrity. They regulate themselves. You showed that you could hold responsibility without resentment, authority without arrogance, and accountability without blame. That combination is rare, and rarity is what advancement responds to. There is a difference between being alone and feeling abandoned. Most people never learn it. They equate silence with rejection, distance with failure, solitude with something having gone wrong. That belief collapses them the moment support disappears. You were tested here in a very quiet way. People didn't necessarily leave dramatically. Some simply stopped showing up. Some became unavailable. Some drifted without explanation. And the environment didn't replace them. No new voices rushed in. No immediate community appeared. No reassurance arrived to soften the space. This is where most people panic. They rush to fill the silence. They reach for distraction. They compromise standards just to avoid being alone with themselves. You didn't it. You stayed. You allowed the emptiness to exist without interpreting it as a verdict on your worth. That is extremely rare, because abandonment wounds the ego deeply. It triggers questions people are afraid to face. Was I not enough? Did I misjudge everything? Did I lose something I needed? Most people react to those questions by running from them. You faced them without collapsing. You understood something critical. Aloneness is not punishment. It is refinement. Free mind isolates before it elevates. Because noise interferes with alignment. Because influence distorts identity before it's stabilized. Because growth requires space. You didn't mistake isolation for rejection. You recognized it as recalibration. That awareness changed everything. Instead of seeking replacement, you focused on regulation. Instead of chasing connection, you strengthened connection with yourself. Instead of needing to be understood, you focused on being coherent. That shift protected your structure. Most people become desperate in isolation. They soften their boundaries. They tolerate what they shouldn't set. They attach to anything that reduces the discomfort. You didn't do that. You didn't beg for presence. You didn't perform for attention. You didn't dilute yourself to be kept. You stayed intact. This is why the lesson mattered so much. Free mind does not advance those who need constant reinforcement to exist. It advances those who can remain stable without external anchors. You demonstrated emotional self-sufficiency. That doesn't mean you rejected connection. It means you were no longer dependent on it to feel whole. You learned to sit with your own thoughts without turning them into enemies. You learned to move through days without needing validation to confirm your direction. You learned to let silence sharpen you instead of frightening you. That's mastery. And here's what most people don't just realize. The ones who fear abandonment are easily controlled. They compromise early. They accept less than alignment just to avoid being alone. You removed that leverage. By staying alone without feeling abandoned, you proved that your sense of self does not collapse when others are absent. That makes you dangerous in the best way, because no one can threaten you with withdrawal. No one can manipulate you with distance. No one can rush you by creating scarcity of attention. You became grounded. This is why, after this stage, your presence changed. You stopped reaching. You stopped chasing. You stopped needing. And paradoxically, that's when alignment begins returning. Because connection follows stability, not desperation. Free mind recognizes this moment as structural independence. Before this, support mattered. After this, support became optional. You didn't feel abandoned because you understood something fundamental. Nothing essential left you. What left was noise. What remained was clarity. And clarity is enough. The moment pressure lingers, the mind starts bargaining with time. It asks when. It asks how long. It asks what shortcut could make this end sooner. Most people don't fail because they choose the wrong path. They fail because they rush the right one. You were tested here through waiting. Not passive waiting, but sustained effort without acceleration. The environment offered you temptation in subtle forms: speed, quick fixes, premature conclusions. You could have forced movement. You could have demanded answers. You could have acted simply to feel progress. Many do. They rush closure. They rush decisions. They rush transformation before it has stabilized. You didn't set. You respected timing. That restraint required something most people lack: trust without urgency. Urgency feels productive. It creates the illusion of control. It convinces the mind that action equals progress. But rushed outcomes often collapse later. They skip integration. They bypass maturity. Free mind does not reward speed. It rewards precision. You understood that forcing an outcome doesn't bring resolution. It brings distortion. So you waited without stagnating. You continued refining, continued observing, continued adjusting quietly. You allowed the process to complete itself rather than dragging it forward. That decision protected the integrity of what you were building. Most people don't realize how dangerous impatience is. It doesn't look like weakness. It looks like ambition. But impatience contaminates judgment. It narrows perception. It makes people trade depth for immediacy. You avoided that trap. You didn't interpret delay as denial. You didn't read slowness as failure. You didn't confuse stillness with being stuck. You recognize that certain outcomes arrive only when pressure is removed. Because pressure compresses insight. It rushes choices before they're ready to hold weight. You gave time the space to work. That showed maturity. Free mind evaluates this stage carefully because time mastery predicts long-term stability. People who rush outcomes often repeat cycles. They arrive early and leave incomplete. They win quickly and lose slowly. You chose durability over speed. You let clarity settle. You allowed decisions to crystallize rather than forcing them into shape. That patience revealed confidence, because only insecure minds rush validation. Only uncertain minds chase conclusions. You were willing to let the outcome arrive on its own terms. And here is what most people miss. When you stop rushing, outcomes start aligning. Not because you waited longer, but because you stopped interfering. You removed desperation from the equation. You removed anxiety from your decisions. You allowed coherence to lead. That's why when movement finally happened, it felt clean, unforced, stable. Not dramatic, but correct. Free mind recognized this moment as readiness, because anyone can act fast. Very few can act at the right time. You didn't rush the outcome. And because of that, when it arrived, it stayed. There comes a point in every serious transformation where comfort makes a final offer. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. It shows up as relief, as familiarity, as the option to return to what once felt safe. The choice you faced here wasn't between right and wrong. It was between who you were becoming and who you used to be. Comfort rarely looks dangerous. It looks reasonable. It whispers that you've done enough, that you've earned rest, that there's no need to keep carrying the weight. Most people accept that offer. They trade identity for ease without realizing it. They choose familiarity over alignment. They return to patterns that require less from them. You didn't set. You recognized that comfort, at this stage, would have cost you coherence. Coherence is when your actions, values, and direction point in the same way. Comfort would have bent that alignment just enough to feel good and just enough to stall growth. You chose against it. That decision wasn't dramatic. It didn't first feel heroic. It felt heavy, because choosing identity over comfort often means choosing discomfort without applause. It means continuing even when stopping would be understandable. It means declining ease without being certain what replaces it. You accepted that uncertainty. Free mind evaluates this moment closely because comfort is the most effective form of control. People will endure pain for growth. They will resist pressure. They will survive difficulty. But comfort dissolves discipline quietly. You didn't instead let it. You didn't justify compromise by calling it balance. You didn't confuse exhaustion with completion. You didn't soften your standards to make the moment easier. You stayed aligned. That alignment required sacrifice. You gave up immediate relief. You gave up familiar routines. You gave up identities that no longer matched your direction. That loss wasn't it loud, but it was real. Most people underestimate how painful growth is at this stage. Not because it hurts, but because it asks you to let go of versions of yourself that once kept you safe. You let them go. That is why this lesson mattered. Free mind does not advance those who choose comfort when alignment is required. It advances those who protect identity even when it costs them ease. You proved you could hold discomfort without betraying who you were becoming. That is strength, because identity is not what you claim. It is what you refuse to abandon under pressure. You refused, and here is the deeper truth. Comfort delays transformation. Identity completes it. The moment you chose identity, the evaluation shifted. Because at that point, you were no longer being shaped by circumstances. You were shaping yourself. You didn't to move toward what felt good. You moved toward what felt correct. That choice anchored everything that followed, and that's why the test didn't return. You chose identity over comfort, and once that choice is made, there is no going back. This is where the evaluation becomes absolute. Up to this point, many people can survive pressure, discipline themselves for a season, and even endure isolation. But consistency in private exposes everything. Because when no one is watching, there is no reward for integrity, no recognition, no applause, no immediate consequence for cutting corners. This is where most people quietly split in two. They maintain standards in public, but loosen them in private. They perform alignment when it seems visible, but negotiate values when they think it doesn't matter. You did instead. You acted the same when there was no audience. That consistency revealed something critical. Your behavior was not driven by image. You didn't need to be seen doing the right thing to keep doing it. You didn't need approval to stay disciplined. You didn't need consequence to remain honest with yourself. This is extremely rare. Free mind pays close attention here because private behavior predicts long-term reliability. Public performance can be maintained temporarily. Private integrity cannot be faked for long. You were alone with your choices. No one would have known if you compromised. No one would have corrected you if you slipped. And yet, you didn't change. You didn't relax your standards when the pressure lifted. You didn't allow yourself small exceptions, just this once. You didn't tell yourself that nobody would be affected. You understood something most people don't. The person you are when no one is watching is the only person you ever truly become. Everything else is performance. Free mind does not advance performers. It advances those whose internal structure is stable without surveillance. Because once responsibility increases, supervision decreases. You showed that you could be trusted without monitoring. That trust is not given lightly. You demonstrated alignment across all environments, public, private, pressured, and calm. That consistency is what marks readiness. Here is the deeper layer most people miss. Private integrity is not about morality, it's about coherence. When your private and public selves are aligned, energy stops leaking. There is no internal conflict, no self-betrayal, no hidden erosion of confidence. You experienced that stability. That's why your presence felt heavier afterward, why your decisions felt cleaner, why hesitation disappeared. Because you weren't managing two versions of yourself anymore. You became one. Free mind recognizes this moment as final clearance. Because if someone acts the same when unseen, they don't need control. They don't need enforcement. They don't need constant correction. They regulate themselves. You proved that you could be left alone with responsibility and not distort it. That is the highest form of trust. And that's why at this stage, the testing stopped. You were no longer being observed to see if you would fail. You were being observed to confirm you wouldn't set. You acted the same when no one was watching. And that is why free mind is proud. The highest tests are never felt as tests. They don't arrive with pressure that screams, "This is important." They don't come with stakes that announce themselves. They move quietly, almost invisibly, through ordinary moments. That was the final design. Because awareness changes behavior, and behavior under awareness is no longer pure. If you had known you were being evaluated, part of you would have performed. You would have monitored yourself, adjusted consciously, acted with an eye toward outcome. That would have disqualified the result. So the final test unfolded beneath your notice. You thought you were just living, enduring, adjusting, making choices the best way you knew how. You didn't realize that the moment you stopped asking, "Am I doing this right?" the evaluation had already ended. That sets the paradox. The test wasn't passed when you succeeded. It was passed when you stopped needing to pass. This is where most people never arrive. They stay stuck in self-surveillance, constantly checking progress, constantly wondering if they're enough, if they're late, if they missed something. That loop keeps them testable. You exited it. At some point, quietly, you stopped negotiating with the process. You stopped measuring yourself against milestones. You stopped asking the environment for signs. You simply acted from alignment. That shift is not dramatic. It's such subtle, almost anticlimactic. But it sets definitive. Because once someone stops needing confirmation, they can no longer be controlled by uncertainty. Free mind does not finalize evaluations based on achievement. It finalizes them based on self-governance. And self-governance appears only when someone moves correctly without supervision, pressure, or reward. That SEP's what you demonstrated. You didn't say, "I has been doing this to be approved." You didn't say, I'm doing this so something will happen." You just did it. That SEP's when the system marked completion. Here is the part almost no one understands. The reason things felt quieter afterward was not because something was missing. It was because something ended. The noise of evaluation disappeared. The tension of being measured dissolved. The background pressure lifted. Not because life became easy, but because scrutiny was no longer required. You were no longer being shaped. You were trusted to shape yourself. That SEP's why outcomes began aligning without force. Why resistance faded without explanation. Why certain doors closed cleanly instead of painfully. The test wasn't de-escalating anymore. It was over. Free mind doesn't celebrate this moment loudly. There is no announcement. No dramatic payoff. Because people who reach this stage don't need validation. They feel the shift internally. They notice a difference in how they decide, how they move, how they no longer feel rushed, threatened, or reactive. They stop asking permission from circumstances. You felt that. And here is the final truth. You were never being tested to see if you were worthy. You were being tested to see if you were ready. Ready to act without being managed. Ready to hold responsibility without resentment. Ready to move without fear of being misunderstood. Ready to carry influence without ego. Ready to exist without needing reassurance. Readiness doesn't announce itself, it stabilizes. That sets why this ending feels quiet. But it is absolute. There is no retest for this stage. No regression unless chosen deliberately. No return to the same kind of pressure. Because the system no longer needs to provoke you. You didn't even realize you were passing, and that's precisely why you did. The moment you stopped trying to become something, you proved that you already were. This phase is complete. What comes next is not a test. It accepts responsibility, and that responsibility was not given lightly. If you're listening to this and something inside you feels steady rather than excited, that's SEPS, not an accident. Excitement fades. Clarity stays. You weren't moved forward because you wanted something badly. You were moved forward because you became someone stable enough to carry it. That's why the noise stopped. That's why the pressure lifted. That's why the old patterns no longer pull at you. Free mind doesn't reward effort alone. It recognizes alignment. And alignment doesn't shout, it settles. You don't need to rush what comes next. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need proof that this mattered. The test is over. What comes next isn't set about becoming, it's about being trusted. Move carefully, move deliberately, and don't look back for confirmation. You already have it.